Okay, hello and welcome everybody to another of our Inside Coach webinars. Delighted today to be joined by our resident Beyond Pulse expert, Mr. Jonny Wilson. Jonny is the resident expert for Beyond Pulse regarding all things sports medicine and performance. So Jonny, thank you for sharing your time with us today, mate. Really looking forward to the valuable insight that you can provide as always.
Thanks for the opportunity, Tom. I'm delighted to take part in it. So yeah, looking forward to it.
All right, mate. So for the benefit of all the viewers today, we're going to discuss with Jonny really how to navigate the ever-challenging college showcase schedule that many of our users and partner clubs will find themselves situated in over the coming months. So Jonny, obviously, here in the US, many of our high school teams will embark upon a winter full of multiple game weekends, multiple games in multiple days, and obviously from our perspective, I would just like to be able to share with the listeners your insight into how we can best manage that challenging schedule, and any recommendations you can provide to make sure that both the players and the teams are able to maximize their performance accordingly. So I guess, Jonny, just to start, from a scientific perspective, what are the challenges that coaches and players will contend with, going through the type of chaotic schedule that I've just referenced? What should they look for, and what are potentially warning signs to look out for, obviously with a heightened risk of injury being present?
Cool. Well, firstly, it's good to kind of start from an overview and say, look, do you know what? All the hard work is done now with regards to training and preparation, and this is the kind of lead up to what we in the UK would term tournament football. So you're either getting into the World Cup or the European Championships or the South American Championships and so on and so forth. So training and training principles kind of go out the window, and what we focus is on performance and on games and how do we recover for the next game, which is, in your case now, will be within 24 hours, and then in some cases it'll be shorter than that. So we always look from the point of the pillars of health for professional footballers, and we talk about 5 pillars of health. So we look at mindset, nutrition, education, exercise, and sleep. And when it comes to tournament football, really, they don't all come into play, but what does come into play very much so is nutrition and sleep.
Yeah.
So they're our first two pillars. So people talk about warm downs and after games to make sure that they're ready for the next day. Well, there isn't an awful lot of evidence with regards to a warm down, and in fact what it can do is delay recovery. So if you're to look at the research that's out there, and the research that's really nailed on for tournament football, is that within that first 30 minutes after a game, you're in the golden window. And you're in a golden window of opportunity to replenish glycogen stores. And glycogen stores are just the fuel that's within the muscle that helps you play the game. So and we're at our most sensitive. So no matter what you eat after a game within that 30 minutes, you eat it and the body is literally craving to replenish those glycogen stores. An hour later, an hour and a half later, 2 hours later, we aren't so sensitive to the food that we put in. So in professional football, when we're trying to recover turn around within short periods of time, sometimes within 24, 48 hours, we're always looking to maximize that golden window of opportunity for nutrition. So straight after the game, take on carbohydrates, a meal which is heavy in carbohydrates. So, you're looking at kind of pastas and breads and so on and so forth, and that'll help be converted into glycogen within the body, and then you can use that to fuel the exercise, to fuel exercise for the game the next day. Important, then hydration. So hydration levels are hugely important when it comes to, number one, mindset and concentration. Number two, when it comes to the onset of fatigue. So if we're dehydrated, we tend to fatigue earlier in games. And if you fatigue in games, what happens is that you're not able to hit your high-speed running as you would have done when you're fully hydrated and ready for the game. So they're the two main things that we focus on straight after a game, rather than like saying, spending 10-15 minutes out doing some stretching and warming down. We tend to try and get the guys in for protein shakes straight away, because we don't want to be in, I don't want to get too technical here, but after a game you go into what's known as a catabolic state, which means that you can kind of erode away some protein which is used as a building block for muscle. So we like to give them a protein shake straight away, and that helps with a bit of and we use milk for that, to be fair, so you know what I mean, so you can use any of your milk flavored drinks. And then we try and get the food on as quick as we possibly can do. Now, some guys don't really like to eat straight after a game. They find it tough. So what we say to them, look, if you can't eat within that half an hour period, try and really maximize what you can take in for the next 3 hours post the game. Now, the moving on from there, then we're looking at sleep. So ideally, even if you were to just have one game at the weekend, the next 3 nights should be 10 hours of sleep.
Wow.
That's the recommended time. So not many of us will get that anyway.
It would be nice, right?
Yeah, it would be nice, but when you think of it, you're exhausted mentally and physically from a game. If you've taken on the right foods or enough food straight after the game, and then you've given yourself time to wind down and get to bed early, then you're going to have the most chance of success if you're looking to perform in this type of tournament. And it's business time now for colleges over there. And if you want to really put yourself out there, then looking at these two things straight away, your nutrition, hydration strategies, and then your sleep strategy is hugely important. Now,
go ahead, mate. Carry on.
So on top of that, the thing that kind of maximizes your recovery here is your mindset. And so for you, Tom, it might be reading a book. For me, it might be walking the dog. For somebody else, it might be talking to their dad or their friends or so on and so forth. But it's a kind of you want a space where you're doing something that you kind of enjoy for you, that's away from football. And it might be just talking to your family or whatever. So it's important to kind of take that half an hour where you're kind of de-stressing and kind of taking the whole kind of, I suppose, coping with the environment, because it's a tough environment, so it's just, really kind of going, right, okay, whatever happened today, whether it was good or bad, it's okay, let it go, and then refocusing for tomorrow, and then having that nice calm mindset, and that's going to help that 10 hours sleep as well.
And mindset, when you recommend that, when would that be being encouraged? Is that straight after a game on the car home? Is it get back to a hotel and feet up?
Again, a place where you feel comfortable. So when we talk about recovery strategies for players, the most important part of recovery is mental recovery. And how people recover mentally is different. Some people do it by walking the dog, by going for a swim, by getting on the bike, by reading a book, by watching a movie, by having a chat with X, Y, and Z, by writing down their experiences in the game, and so on and so forth. Yep. So it's kind of it's your place, it's your space. It might be listening to your favorite music with headphones on while you're on the bus back to the hotel or back to your house or wherever you're staying. But it's about kind of giving yourself 30 minutes, of where it's directed, purposeful time that you're kind of, bringing yourself down from tournament football. So in professional football, what we have on a Tuesday evening is a lot of players really struggle to get to sleep because the game is so late in the evening time. So they've really got to kind of employ these strategies, especially when the turnaround is so quick as well. So, I mean, we're looking at nutrition, we're looking at sleep, and then we're looking at some mindfulness. There's some really good apps out there. Headspace is a good app out there. It's 10 minutes where you're just kind of looking at breathing and just again, just getting yourself in the moment, and being in the moment in football is really important.
That's marvelous, John. And just coming back quickly, obviously you referenced the 30 minutes being that golden window.
Yeah.
Knowing how many of the tournaments are set up that players or coaches will be operating within, the chance to get a purposeful, meaningful meal within that time might be limited. So what could you give any insight into, hey, while this is ideal, maybe something that's more realistic, whether it's a banana or a granola bar, like you say, a chocolate milk, like would there be any, hey, if you can't shoot for this, could you recommend, hey, make sure at the very least you've got this?
Yeah, that's a really good point, right? I'm going to share with you some secrets that we've got now in professional football, because,
Come on then.
and again, we're never
I like secrets, Johnny.
Yeah, we're never in an optimum environment. Okay, so
right.
This is the part I was trying not to say on this webinar. Okay, so it doesn't really matter what you eat in that 30 minutes. Okay, it will actually all be converted to glycogen. Okay, so even if you, and I don't like saying this, right? Okay, but even if you've got to go for a pizza, or it's a McDonald's or whatever, the body, its sensitivity to pick up glycogen, so its insulin sensitivity, makes it hugely resourceful when it comes to turning the food. So you've got this process called glycogenesis, which means that it can turn new glycogen from different sources of food, so from fat, from proteins, and so on and so forth. And it does it best in that 30 minutes. So when we're in the non-optimum environment, i.e. we're probably down at Exeter, we're down at Yeovil, or we're at Cambridge, or wherever, and we've got a 3-hour journey back, we're getting on the bus and we're not going to sit down for a meal. The boys will have pizzas on the bus, on the way back. Not ideal, but we understand the principles of nutrition, we understand the importance of that, and getting anything into you in that 30 minutes is better than nothing. So if it comes down to a Snickers or a Mars bar, I'm not sure if you got those over in the US, or a Hershey's or whatever it is. Again, I'm not recommending this as your reference choice. I'm just saying that something is better than nothing. Yeah. Okay, because you will run out of fuel if you're not replenishing in this 30-minute period in tournament soccer. It's hugely important.
No, it makes a ton of sense. And like you said, I think for the coaches on the call, it's about guiding to make the best choices, but understanding now that, ultimately, I guess if I've understood correctly, that something is absolutely essential during that time point. And obviously, the best thing is,
I mean, if I'm in your position, Tom, I'm after the game and I'm debriefing, everybody's got a milkshake in their hand, everybody's kind of prepped beforehand, and they've got hopefully a sandwich, hopefully they've got, some type of food that they're going to be eating in the next 30 minutes. That's the most important thing. Then my message is, guys, make sure you take a little bit of time out for yourself, and 10 hours sleep tonight, guys, is really important. We want to be ready to go at this again tomorrow. Write down your thoughts. If there's anything bothering you from today, write it down. And really important that you give yourself that type of headspace. So I'm getting my message on to the players, while they are having, while they're taking on board fluids, and they're taking on board nutrition in the form of whatever type of food that is.
Yeah, no, that's great, Johnny. And I think, just linking it to potentially how some of our coaches could act on this. Many of the youth clubs here have, a team, a parent manager, or at the very least, they have the ability to communicate with the families of the players. So again, if I'm hearing correctly, maybe it's a recommendation, if we're not close enough to a field where we could get, a good meal post our game, like you said, whether it's a PB&J, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or
perfect.
But be prepared to have something. That's critical. And so, go on, mate.
Again, without getting too technical, okay. So if you're looking to, they're talking about optimal rehydration and renutritional values. If you have a player who's 60 kilograms, okay, then you're looking at trying to get between 90 to 120 grams of food into that player, in that 30 minutes, which is tough. So you're looking at about 1.5 to 2 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram.
Yeah.
So if I'm 90 kilograms, it's a little bit tougher for me than to get on 180 grams, and look, if you're outside that 30-minute window opportunity, don't worry about it. Don't panic. Get food on in 45 minutes, in an hour, 2 hours, 2.5 hours, 3 hours. It's just, you've got higher sensitivity to pick up that the nutritional value of any food you take in that 30 minutes. But again, look, that's, you know, best case scenario. None of us live in that best case scenario. We've got plenty of players who are giving interviews after games and are not getting on the pizza until 45 an hour. You know, there are so many scenarios, and again, that mindset's important just to cope with adversity, because there lies in wait your opportunity.
Right. No, that's fascinating. Now that's great. That little piece of insight there in terms of just helping players and parents and coaches obviously prepare for their recovery is going to be key. So moving on, John, from once they leave the field, obviously you've referenced some mindfulness and you've referenced the importance of sleep. Talk to me, if you could, about the process. You know, will you encourage any kind of active regeneration work, recovery work on a bike, in the hotel, in the swimming pool, an ice bath maybe, and then from there building into the next day, in your professional opinion, the importance of a breakfast and how early should they be eating prior to performance?
So really good questions. Now, our recovery and regenerative program here takes an 11-step protocol.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, so we've shared with you now the first 3 steps, the most important steps.
Yeah.
Okay, nutrition, mindset, sleep, you know, getting that mental and as well as physical recovery. So the active recovery, regeneration, if it's available, you know, a pool and just going for a little walk in the pool where the pool is up to waist height is fantastic for 10-15 minutes.
Yeah, and it should be. I think most people stay in, you know, hotels in these places that will normally have facilities. So okay, so pool.
A gentle ride on the bike, stationary bike. And again, the heart rate should be going no more than 110 to 120 beats per minute. So it's, you know, very light exercise, not very hard, not very strenuous. What you don't want to do is you don't want to deplenish any glycogen stores. Now, what I should say is when you get on the bike, you increase your sensitivity to pick up even more of the food that you've taken on. So if I've taken on that food and let's say 2 hours later that evening, I get on the bike for 10 minutes or I go in the pool for 10 minutes and I do a little bit of a walk, my muscles are going to take on even more of the food that I've taken on. So it's optimizing again that environment. So this is a principle that we use in season. So when we're in pre-season, so we're in that prep phase, we don't allow ice baths or we don't allow any stretching or any pool work or any bike work after training sessions, because we want players to be sore and we want them to make physiological adaptations. So we want the cell signaling to be there. Now, when we're in season and we've got a quick turnaround, we will use ice baths. So we bring the ice baths with us. We use the bikes. We bring the bikes with us. We will always stay at a hotel where there's a pool there. So, and we will look again. Now you're looking at steps 4, 5, 6, and 7 there. So we're already up on, and it's very easy to self-manage as a player, because what you're taking responsibility of, you know, as in drinking a little bit after the game, making sure you're taking on your food after the game, taking a little bit of time to yourself to, you know, calm yourself down, making sure you're getting to bed early in that time. If there is a bike or a pool or some ability to get in cold water. Now we talk about ice baths. It doesn't have to be ice. The temperature of the water just has to be cold. So anything below 14 degrees does exactly the same job, right? So you don't even have to have ice. So it just has to be
maybe
changed.
60 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, I'm unsure now on that one.
Yeah,
but
60-ish.
Something where you'd go into, right, and you feel, oh, that's a bit cold.
That's chilly. Yeah.
Yeah, so and again, there doesn't really, it just has to be the change in temperature. And the change in temperature, what that does then is it causes a shunt of blood from the extremities, from your legs to the heart, and then it re-pumps out new oxygenated blood. So, and that doesn't have to be freezing.
And how long, John, in an ice or cold water bath, how long are they staying in there?
Yeah, there's no more benefits really of staying in there after 180 seconds. Now we only get our guys in there between 1 minute and 2 minutes. You know, because we've got a cycle between 18 players as well, and sometimes we're away. But you know, really you're getting all the physiological benefits out of that time. There's no need to stay in there any longer. And if you want to maximize it, then it's contrast bathing, so then they can have a hot shower after that.
Yeah. Okay. And then, okay, so assuming that they've been diligent and they've got their food on board and they've, you know, found that time to refocus and re-energize their mindset, that they've had their pool session, they've had their ice bath or their cold water bath. Obviously, you've referenced taking on board plenty of fluids throughout that process still, and they get a good night's sleep. What should breakfast look like? How early in the day? How long prior to performance? And ultimately, you know, the importance of it, because I think I can speak obviously as a coach in these situations. One of the hardest things is pulling teenagers out of bed, especially if you've got 8 a.m., 9 a.m. game, and you know everything is fast forwarded in terms of how early the day starts. But could you reference, you know,
yeah,
to everyone
this is tough when it comes to tournament football, tournament soccer, because you know really you're looking at the very least 90 minutes before the game, right? And you know it's a carbohydrate heavy meal, so you might have a cereal, you might have, you know, a banana 60 minutes before the game, you might have a very weak concentrated carbohydrate drink. So I think you've got Gatorade over in the US, you know, so you're kind of, again, 500 milliliters of that is probably enough. You don't want to go into again, I don't want to get too technical here, but you don't want to go into a hypoglycemic event. So that means that you've taken on too much. Too close to the game, and then your blood sugar levels spike, and within 20 minutes you just go into this huge psychological dip. You just feel, you crash basically. So ideally we would have our pre-match meals at 12 o'clock, and our games are 3 p.m. And we would have chicken and pasta and beans and toast and scrambled eggs. They're the kind of things that we would kind of limit the players to. There'd be cereal there, bananas, you know, plenty fruit there as well, because that's another good source of carbohydrate. Now, I'm aware that your games are early in the morning, so I don't want to be...
Sometimes, right? Not exclusively. I'm just, you know...
Well, let's say if we were in the ideal scenario, then I'd want to be having that type of breakfast, you know, 2.5 hours before the game. If I was in the ideal scenario. Now, if the game is very early, then I'm going to kind of have a lighter breakfast and maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours before the game, because again, you're kind of eroding into sleep as well. So, you know, you really want to make sure that these guys are getting to bed early, because, you know, there's a lot of preparation, there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of logistics with regards to this. Now, what you don't want to do is you don't want to exercise fasted. It's a good type of...
Say that one more time, John, sorry. You don't want to exercise what?
Fasted. So fasted means that, so that you're, so it's a great training routine to exercise fasted once or twice a week, when you're in season or prep season, and you're, you know, kind of maybe on a Tuesday and your game's on a Saturday, and if you have a morning session, then absolutely, or you're into the gym in the morning time, for sure skip breakfast and train, because it's got huge benefits. However, when it comes to game day and competitions, we say no, you must play post having it some type of carbohydrate meal. So it's not a strategy that we would use in professional football or in tournament football when it comes where players would play fasted.
So it's a non-negotiable for you.
Well, now there's always an exception to the rule, and you know a couple of famous England players who wouldn't eat on the day of a game, but they ate very heavily on the day before a game. Now, that became less and less, you know, over the last few years. But there are a couple of exceptions, absolutely. And if a player says to you, you know what, I just can't do this, then, you know, they just can't do it. You know, so they'll be able to manage their own little environment as well. You know, so, you know, if somebody says to me, look, I'm really struggling with this, then it's okay. Let's find another strategy. It might be a banana, it might be a little bit more Gatorade, it might be something that's kind of less heavy on the stomach, it might be something that they like, peanut butter and jelly sandwich, whatever it is. No, it's kind of, we tend to go very plainish, so chicken breasts and pasta with a little bit of tomato sauce, scrambled eggs, toast and butter, bananas, and they kind of just graze on that, but in that 3 to 2 hour window before the game.
Perfect.
And then they'll have a snack an hour, 60 minutes before the game. They'll have a little snack, and that might even be Haribo sweets.
Right, a little sugar boost.
Yeah, they're good carbohydrates as well. So they are, I'm not saying they're good carbohydrates. I'm just saying that they're a form of carbohydrate.
Right.
So,
Perfect. So, okay, so we've gone from post-match and the recovery strategy into now pre-match the next day. Once players are arriving at the field, what do you recommend as an appropriate warm-up duration? Obviously you see there's all sorts. Many teams will arrive 45 minutes, 30 minutes before. Is there a minimal amount of time? Is there such thing as too much warm-up time? And ultimately, if over the course of the weekend, is there any change in recommendations for dynamic warm-ups versus any static stuff? Can you elaborate on any of that?
So when we're on a singular game and we don't have a turnaround for 3 or 4 days, we'll use a 47-minute principle from a warm. So there'll be a physical preparation period there where they're with the fitness coach, and then they'll go and do a little bit of tactical work, some 5v5s with the assistant manager, and then we'll go in and have about 14 minutes to go before the game starts. We go back into the dressing rooms and we have a chat. Now, tournament football is a little bit different, and so we really reduce everything. There are other factors that will make us reduce time constraint. We'll put time constraints on as well. Number 1 will be altitude. Number 2 will be the heat. So if it's a hot environment or it's a very cold environment, then we will certainly, cut that down, because anything you're doing in the warm-up may take away from performance. So in tournament football, the physical prep, we're very tight on 8 minutes. 8 minutes is 8 minutes, yeah, 8 minutes is enough. Then they'll transition over to the football coach, and my recommendation to the football coach here now would be no more than 12 minutes.
Okay, so 20 start to finish.
So, yeah, and then that gives you, so that would be then give you 5 minutes then to have a chat with your players. I wouldn't want any more than 5 minutes at this age group. It's a case of, if the game is at 11 a.m. in the morning, then it would be 20 minutes from 10:55 a.m. so that the coach then can get on his final message. The players can make their final adjustments, put on their shin pads, I don't know what you call them over there, adjust their socks, or do whatever they need to do. So they've got that time. That 5 minutes is really important for them as well, to just kind of mentally prepare or physically prepare or get, and then for the manager, the coach, to get on his message. But no more than 20 minutes, 8 minutes on physical prep. And then your question in regards to dynamic and static stretching, if you're going to employ a static stretching regime, the research is blanket on it, and it says that your rate of force production, so your power and strength levels, are decreased for the next 4 hours following that. So there's been more of a pendulum shift now to dynamic stretching. Yeah, and really it should be kind of swinging a little bit more in another direction, in the fact of it's more movement patterns. So kind of getting them into a little bit of a jog and different types of transitioning for different, running backwards, running sideways, opening up the hips, looking at dynamically moving through range on the hamstrings, but then looking at the demands where they may get injured. So in all warm-ups, I'm going to have high-speed running. But when I do high-speed running with all my players, I say, lads, this is the warm-up. Nobody gets injured in the warm-up. So when I tell you sprint, you're at 90% of what you think you can sprint. You're at 95%. You're never going at 100%. So that's really important. And then with regards to the 5v5s, high intensity, punctuated by plenty breaks, so that they can get on some weak carbohydrate solution drinks when they're with the coach. So even when they're with me for that 8 minutes, they still have at least 2 opportunities just to take on a little bit of a drink, depending on the weather. And then with the coach, then I'm kind of working with the coach and kind of saying, look, we really need to be scheduling in, 30-second breaks where they can take on some carbohydrate water or a solution, and then they're back in with you. So it's kind of high intensity, get your message on, high intensity, and then final message for 5 minutes, where they can also get ready as well. So
Perfect.
really, yeah, no more than that.
And I think it's important at this point, John, to reference, you know, for coaches, if you look at the cumulative load across the days, if you're warming up for 30, 35, 40 minutes prior to a tournament match, and ultimately aggregated over 3 different warm-ups, you've accumulated the same type of maybe load that you would across another game, right? And we don't want to add, certainly don't want to add that into the schedules. Okay, so would anything change, John, by game 3 of a weekend, or is it still, you know, hey, same kind of protocol?
The principle will be the same. However, we will certainly be responsive, and in some cases we'll have to be reactive to the group. So if the group are kind of, you know, yeah, I'll respond to what their needs are. If they're pretty fresh, if they're, you know, we're doing well, if the results have gone our way, if everything has kind of been okay with regards to the opposition, and, you know, we've had a bit of a straightforward run through, then absolutely we'll most likely stick to what's been working so far. If it's been a bit of a tough, you know, grueling, you know, going through, then some players will be afforded a little bit of time where, you know, I'm going to say to them, look, you're going at 60% in the phys prep warm-up. We're now going to cut down the technical and tactical stuff to maybe 12 minutes, to maybe 14 minutes, you know, whatever. It might be a 50% reduction, but I'd certainly be responding to the group for sure.
Perfect. And then I think my kind of last point on this, and more perhaps for a conversation for wearable tech, for Beyond Pulse users, or, you know, or people that have access to player data and tracking of external loads and distance covered, how would you recommend coaches operate with that information? Somebody's covered 10, 11, 12K game 1, maybe they've managed it game 2. You know, obviously, again, are they at a higher risk of injury? Can they repeat it? You know, how does that type of information perhaps influence coaching decisions from your perspective?
Look, we've always at Beyond Pulse been very kind of mature and realistic on what we can do and what we can possibly predict, and how wearable technology and artificial intelligence are changing the landscape of football. So in tournament football, it's a hugely important tool to monitor, okay, and maybe to pick out an outlier in the group and then to have a chat with him, because you know, the data may say that he's got a high heart rate, or that he's covered, you know, a huge amount of distance in comparison to everybody else, and, you know, it's gone to game 1 and game 2. But this might be the person who's got that type of resilience and that type of physiology that he's just able to manage. Yeah, and just by looking at somebody. So, for example, I would kind of reverse it the other way and kind of say, right, if I thought that somebody was struggling, that's kind of then when I'm kind of, you know, analyzing the data as such. That when I'm looking at the team and everybody's okay and they're coping, then I'm looking at the data and I'm kind of going, okay, that's interesting, rather than making a decision on the data itself. But I would definitely have a chat with somebody, you know, if I thought there was an outlier in the group who'd covered an awful lot, maybe had a high heart rate response, maybe their active participation was quite high, maybe their high speed running in comparison to their total distance was quite high, I'd have a chat with them, but I probably wouldn't make a decision on the data itself. But I'd definitely kind of, you know, pull them to one side and say, how are you feeling, you know, and if they're responding appropriately and saying, no, look, coach, I'm pretty good here, this is, you know, well within my capability, then, you know, we've got to build resilience. You know, the Beyond Pulse is there to help us to make better decisions and to say, look, you know, this is to highlight the good guys as well.
Right. No, I think that's brilliant. I think it's super important to reference that, you know, our data or anybody's data is there to, you know, to support decisions and provide insight. It's not there to necessarily make them independently of, you know, understanding context. So really,
the coach is a central character here, you know, the coach. Absolutely. And then just kind of being able to kind of look at it and kind of go, okay,
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I understand what it's saying and so on and so forth. I'm still going to use it in a very sensible manner. I'm going to have a chat. And then sometimes you see data that comes up and you go, I'm not sure if that's plausible. And that happens in all forms of data. So that's important to know as well.
No, absolutely. Well, John, thank you for your time, mate. I've certainly learned a bunch. I've scribbled down all my notes on the pages as well. So I'm hopeful that other people that have the fortune of listening can also share from the wisdom and the insight. And as ever, mate, thank you for being gracious enough to share your time with us. And we look forward to many more opportunities to share in your wisdom.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, John. Take care, mate.